I grew up in a remote Afghan village under strict traditions.
Hello and welcome back to another video. Comment below where you're watching from. What would drive a dedicated Taliban fighter to risk everything on a freezing inflatable raft in the Aegean Sea and ultimately find a new life in a centuries-old monastery? This is the true story of Ahmed, who grew up in a remote village in Afghanistan and, in June 2013, shared his former identity on the slopes of Mount Athos, Greece. After a perilous journey through Pakistan and Iran and a harrowing 10-hour crossing to Lesbos, Alexander embraced Christianity. Over the next 6 years in Athens and on Mount Athos, he traded weapons for prayers, fear for faith, and discovered a peace he had never imagined. Stay tuned for every harrowing detail of his transformation.
The waves crashed relentlessly against our flimsy inflatable raft, each crest a looming mountain, each trough a dizzying chasm. The winter air bit into my exposed skin, colder than any mountain wind I had ever known in Afghanistan. Beside me, my companion shivered, his eyes wide with a terror that mirrored my own. 10 hours, the smuggler had promised. 10 hours across the Aegean Sea on a moonless night, and then freedom. But with every punishing slap of water, every lurch of the small boat, I questioned that promise. The engine sputtered, died for a terrifying moment, and then coughed back to life, a weak heartbeat against the ocean's roar. Salt spray stung my eyes, blurring the already invisible horizon. I clutched the rough plastic of the raft, my knuckles white, my whole being focused on the next breath, the next wave, the desperate hope of seeing land. This was it. This was the moment where my past, the violence, the dust, the unending conflict, would either drown me or release me to an unknown future. The small light on the distant shore, a mere pinprick in the vast darkness, seemed impossibly far away, a cruel taunt from a different world. My muscles ached from the cold and the constant tension, my teeth chattered uncontrollably, but I dared not relax, dared not give in to the overwhelming exhaustion. Every fibre of my being screamed for survival. This was the ultimate test, the final hurdle in my desperate flight from a life that had become unbearable. I had faced death many times before, in the mountains and valleys of my homeland, but never like this, at the mercy of an indifferent, vast ocean. The thought of turning back, of returning to the life I had fled, spurred me on, a more potent fear than the raging sea itself. I remembered the faces of the people I had left behind, their suffering, their unending struggle under a regime that had promised peace but delivered only more pain. I could not go back. This journey, this perilous crossing, was my only hope, my only chance at a different destiny. I closed my eyes for a fleeting second, not in surrender, but in a silent, desperate prayer for strength, for deliverance. The cold wind howled around me, a mournful lament, but deep within my core, a tiny spark of hope flickered, refusing to be extinguished by the storm. Let's start from the beginning. I was born in a small, rural village in Afghanistan, a place where the landscape itself seemed etched with the scars of perpetual conflict. My earliest memories are not of gentle lullabies or peaceful fields, but of the omnipresent echoes of war, the distant thud of explosions, the rattle of gunfire, the sudden frantic shouts of adults. I do not remember any more who fought whom. However, there was constant warfare. Our village, like so many others, was a chessboard upon which larger, unseen forces moved their pieces. We were the pawns, caught in the endless struggle. Dust, poverty, and a stern, unyielding form of Islamic education were the companions of my childhood. There was no escaping the war. It was in the very air we breathed, in the stories the elders told, in the eyes of the men who passed through our village carrying their worn rifles. The sky above our mud-brick homes was often streaked with the trails of aircraft, or clouded with the smoke from distant fires. Childhood was not a time of innocence for us. It was a time of learning survival, of understanding the constant threat that hovered over our lives. We learned early to distinguish between the sounds of different weapons, to instinctively seek shelter when the drones of engines grew too close. Our games were often imitations of the war around us, grim reflections of the reality we inhabited. Education for us was strictly Taliban mandated. We sat on rough mats in makeshift classrooms, often in a communal building or under a simple tent, memorizing verses from the Quran. The mullahs, with their stern faces and long beards, taught us about jihad, about the glory of sacrifice, about the purity of our faith. They spoke of outsiders as infidels, of a corrupted world that sought to undermine our traditions and our way of life. There was no room for questioning, no space for doubt. The world was black and white, good versus evil, and our duty was clear: to defend Islam, to fight for justice, to bring order to a land consumed by chaos. I absorbed these lessons, like a sponge soaking up water. They became the very framework of my understanding of the world. My family, like most, was devout. Prayer was a constant rhythm of our days. Life was hard, food was often scarce, and simple comforts were rare. But there was a strong sense of community, of shared hardship, and a collective belief in a divine purpose. We were taught to be resilient, to endure, to trust in Allah's plan, even when that plan seemed to involve endless suffering. The teachings were absolute, leaving little room for individual thought or interpretation. We were told that our suffering was a test, a purification, and that true reward awaited those who remained steadfast in their faith and fought for its principles. We heard stories of the glorious martyrs, men who had given their lives for Islam, and these tales filled us with a sense of awe and a longing for similar honor. The village elders reinforced these lessons, sharing their own experiences of decades of conflict and foreign interference. They spoke of the need for a strong, unified Islamic force to repel invaders and restore justice. This narrative was woven into the very fabric of our lives, shaping our identities and our aspirations. We were taught to be disciplined, to suppress our individual desires for the greater good of the community and the faith. The outside world, as portrayed to us, was a place of decadence and moral decay, a threat to our pure way of life. Our only salvation, we believed, lay in strict adherence to Islamic law as interpreted by our leaders. This rigid worldview provided a sense of order in a chaotic world, a clear path forward in a land that had known little but turmoil for generations. The simple routines of our village life, the prayers, the communal meals, the shared labor in the fields, were all imbued with a religious significance, reinforcing our collective identity and purpose. Every action was guided by faith, every decision weighed against its adherence to the Quran and the teachings of the mullahs. There was a sense of profound certainty in our beliefs, a conviction that we were on the right path, guided by divine will. This certainty was comforting amidst the constant insecurity of war, offering a sense of control over our destinies, even when so much was out of our hands. As I grew into a young man, it felt natural, almost inevitable, that I would join the Taliban. The lines between civilian life and military involvement were blurred in our village. Everyone was affected. Everyone had a role to play in the struggle. The promises of the Taliban, of bringing peace and stability, of upholding pure Islamic law, resonated deeply within me. I believed in their mission. I believed they were the only ones who could truly restore our land. I joined their ranks, eager to contribute, to be part of something greater than myself, something that promised an end to the pervasive lawlessness and corruption that plagued Afghanistan. I performed various roles, whatever was asked of me. I was a devout adherent to their radical ideology. I believed it was the path to righteousness, the way to earn paradise. The training was rigorous, demanding absolute obedience and unwavering commitment. We learned to handle weapons, to navigate the rugged terrain, to operate as a disciplined force. The days were long, filled with drills and ideological instruction. We were told stories of past glories, of martyrdom, of the enemies we faced. My mind was focused, my purpose clear. I was part of a movement that I believed would bring true Islamic justice to my homeland. I accepted without question the idea that any hardship, any suffering, any act committed in the name of our cause, was justified by the righteousness of our struggle. We were fighting for Allah, for Islam, for the very soul of Afghanistan. Our leaders spoke with conviction, their words like fire, igniting a fervent zeal within us. We were taught to view the world through a very narrow lens, where every event, every conflict, every human interaction was ultimately a battle between good and evil, between believers and infidels. I learned the customs of war, the harsh discipline required, the necessity of absolute loyalty to the command structure. We would spend weeks, sometimes months, in remote areas, living off the land, enduring extreme weather, always vigilant, always ready. The camaraderie among the fighters was strong, born of shared risk and a common purpose. We were brothers, bound by an oath to Allah and to each other. We believed we were purifying our land, cleansing it of foreign influences and internal corruption. The idea of martyrdom was glorified, presented not as an end, but as a glorious passage to a higher existence, a reward for ultimate devotion. I envisioned myself achieving this honor, if it were Allah's will. The constant exposure to violence, the grim realities of conflict, hardened me. Emotions were suppressed, replaced by a cold determination to fulfill my duty. I was a soldier of the faith, and my heart was dedicated to the cause. I saw myself as an instrument of divine will, carrying out the commands of Allah through the actions of the movement. There was a fierce pride in our discipline, our resilience, our unwavering commitment in the face of what we perceived as overwhelming odds. We believed our faith made us invincible, that Allah would grant us victory against any enemy, no matter how powerful. This belief was a shield against fear, a source of unwavering strength. But as the years passed, a subtle shift began within me. The reality on the ground started to diverge from the ideals I had been taught. The unrelenting cycle of misery, violence, and poverty seemed to intensify, rather than diminish. I saw suffering everywhere, in the eyes of the villagers, in the worn faces of the children. The promises of peace felt increasingly hollow, lost in the constant drumbeat of conflict. I witnessed actions that troubled my conscience, acts of brutality that, while justified by our leaders as necessary for Islamic law, gnawed at something deeper within me. The rigid adherence to rules, the harsh punishments, the lack of mercy in certain situations began to weigh heavily on my soul. Was this truly the path of righteousness? Was this what Allah desired? The questions were silent at first, whispers in my own mind, too dangerous to voice aloud. They were doubts that had no place in our ideology, no permission to exist. I saw the faces of the innocent, caught in the crossfire, their lives shattered, their futures extinguished. The justifications for their suffering, that it was a necessary sacrifice for the greater good, began to ring hollow. I remembered the teachings of compassion, the stories of mercy from the Quran, and they seemed to contradict the harsh realities I was living. The constant state of war, the endless cycle of revenge, the pervasive fear, began to exhaust me. My spirit, once so fervent, began to feel weary. I started to notice the hypocrisy, the inconsistencies within our ranks, the ways in which power sometimes corrupted the very principles we claimed to uphold. The initial purity of our mission seemed to become tainted by the very human failings of those who led it. I saw how easily anger and fear could be manipulated, how ideology could be twisted to justify cruelty. The sense of unwavering purpose began to crumble, replaced by a profound unease. I would lie awake at night, staring at the dark sky, listening to the sounds of the night, and my mind would race. Was this what I had committed my life to? An endless cycle of destruction? Was there no other way? The questions multiplied, growing louder in my mind, echoing off the walls of my skull. I felt a growing sense of emptiness, a void that no amount of ideological fervor could fill. The paradise I had been promised seemed further away than ever, replaced by a very real, very present hell on earth. I longed for a genuine peace, a lasting tranquillity that was not built upon the subjugation of others or the shedding of innocent blood. This longing was a dangerous seed, planted in the fertile ground of my growing disillusionment. It was a secret desire, hidden deep within my heart, that whispered of a different kind of life, a life free from the suffocating grip of violence and unending conflict. I observed the faces of the people we controlled, their muted expressions, their suppressed despair. This was not the joyous, righteous society I had been promised. This was a society living in fear, a society enduring rather than thriving. My conscience, long dormant under the weight of dogma, began to awaken, stinging me with the harsh reality of our actions and their consequences. At the age of 23, the internal crisis reached a breaking point. I could no longer bear this sort of life. The misery, the poverty, the constant violence, and the omnipresent threat of death had become unbearable. I looked at the faces around me, at the endless cycle of revenge and retribution, and I saw no end to the pain. My heart longed for something different, a genuine peace that seemed perpetually out of reach in Afghanistan. The ideology that had once given me purpose now felt like a cage, stifling my spirit. I realized that my life's path, as it was leading me only deeper into a darkness from which there seemed no escape. I began to seek escape. It was a terrifying decision, fraught with unimaginable risks. To leave the Taliban, to abandon everything I had known, was to become an enemy, a target, an apostate in the eyes of the very people I had once served. But the yearning for freedom, for a different kind of life, had become stronger than the fear. Every fibre of my being yearned for release from the constant tension, the ever-present threat, the moral compromises. I knew the penalty for defection, for questioning the authority, for betraying the cause. It was death, swift and brutal. My own comrades, men I had fought alongside, would become my hunters. The thought sent shivers down my spine, but the alternative, remaining in that suffocating reality, felt like a slow, agonizing death of the spirit. I meticulously planned my escape in secret, observing patterns, waiting for the opportune moment. Each day was a tightrope walk, balancing my outward adherence to the ideology with a desperate longing for freedom festering within. I watched for any sign of suspicion, any hint that my true intentions might be discovered. The air itself felt thick with surveillance. The nights were the worst, filled with restless thoughts, mapping out routes, imagining the countless obstacles. I knew I could not take anything with me, no documents, no possessions, only the clothes on my back and the desperate hope in my heart. The thought of leaving my homeland, the only place I had ever known, was painful, a wrenching separation from my roots. But I knew that staying meant certain spiritual death, if not physical. My resolve hardened with each passing day. The vision of a life free from the constant shadow of violence, a life where peace was not a distant dream but a tangible reality, became my guiding star. I prepared myself mentally for the hardships that lay ahead, for the hunger, the cold, the loneliness, the constant fear of capture. Anything was better than the slow decay of my soul within the confines of that life. I made a silent vow to myself that if I survived, I would seek a true path, a path of genuine peace and understanding, whatever that might be. The escape was perilous. I slipped across the Afghan-Pakistan border under the cloak of night, a ghost in my own land. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every rustle of leaves a potential betrayer. I walked for days, fueled by a desperate hope and a gnawing fear. My heart pounded with the slightest sound. The mountainous terrain was unforgiving, harsh and vast, stretching endlessly before me. I moved cautiously, avoiding known checkpoints, relying on instinct and the faint memories of old paths. The nights were bitterly cold, the days often scorching, and food was a constant worry. I scrounging for whatever edible plants I could find, surviving on scraps, constantly feeling the pangs of hunger in my stomach. The exhaustion was bone deep, but I dared not stop for long, knowing that any delay could mean capture and certain death. I had no documentation, no papers to prove my existence, let alone my journey. My identity was a secret I had to guard with my life. From Pakistan, I moved into Iran, a vast and unfamiliar land. The journey across Iran was a long, arduous trek, spanning 2 years. I lived on the fringes of society, working odd jobs, often illegally, to earn enough for food and a place to sleep. I worked in construction, in fields, whatever manual labor was available, always keeping my head down, drawing no attention to myself. The fear of being discovered, of being sent back, was a constant companion. I learned to blend in, to speak little, to trust no one fully. The journey was long, exhausting, and filled with moments of despair, but I pushed on, driven by the elusive dream of reaching the West. I saw glimpses of a different life in the cities of Iran, a life with more freedoms, more choices, than I had ever known. These fleeting observations fueled my determination, reinforcing my decision to leave my past behind. I became adept at navigating the hidden networks of migrants and smugglers, a silent passenger in the vast human tide flowing westward. I learned to discern trustworthy faces from those who would exploit desperate souls. Each day was a test of resilience, each night a battle against despair. The weight of my past, the constant threat of discovery, pressed down on me, but the vision of a new life, a life of peace and freedom, pulled me forward. I learned to ration my meager earnings, to sleep in hidden corners, to live with the constant gnawing of hunger. But I was free, free from the direct command of the Taliban, free to choose my own direction, however perilous that choice might be. This nascent freedom, even in its rawest form, was a powerful motivator, a whisper of the possibilities that lay beyond the horizon. I walked across deserts, traversed rough mountains, always moving, always seeking the next step on my path to true liberty. My determination to reach the West led me to Turkey. The next leg of the journey was the most terrifying. I found a smuggler who promised passage to Greece across the Aegean Sea. He put me and a companion on a small, inflatable raft on a moonless winter night. The sea was an immense, dark expanse, unpredictable and unforgiving. The waves were not gentle. They were violent, smashing against our tiny vessel, threatening to capsize us with every surge. For 10 harrowing hours, we battled the stormy seas. The cold seeped into my bones, numbness crept into my limbs, but the fear kept me awake, alert, clinging to the hope of dawn. I prayed as I had never prayed before, not the formal prayers I had learned in the madrasas, but raw, desperate pleas for survival, for deliverance from the raging waters. The wind howled like a banshee, whipping the spray into our faces, making it impossible to see beyond the immediate, terrifying swell of the waves. Every muscle in my body ached from the constant tension of clinging to the raft. My companion and I exchanged glances of pure terror, our faces pale in the almost absolute darkness, illuminated only by the brief flashes of phosphorescence in the water. I thought of my past life, of the certainty I once had, and how utterly insignificant it all seemed against the vast, indifferent power of the ocean. This was a different kind of battle, one where human will felt futile against the forces of nature. The engine of the small boat, its only source of propulsion, seemed perilously close to giving out at any moment. Each sputter sent a jolt of pure panic through me. I imagined the icy embrace of the sea, the endless darkness below, the finality of it all. But then, a stubborn resolve would reassert itself. I had come too far, endured too much, to surrender now. The thought of the freedom that awaited, a life truly free from the shadows of my past, propelled me forward, urging me to hold on, to endure just a little longer. When we finally spotted the rocky Turkish coast of Lesvos, it was a moment of sheer, overwhelming relief, tinged with disbelief that we had survived. The cold, wet sand beneath my numb feet felt like the softest carpet in the world. I collapsed, gasping for breath, tears mingling with the salt spray on my face. We had made it. We were alive. Upon reaching the shore, exhausted and disoriented, we were met by a local woman. At first, I mistook her for a Muslim pilgrim, perhaps due to some aspect of her dress or demeanor. She had a kind, open face, and her eyes held a compassion I had not seen in a long time. She did not question us, she did not judge. Instead, she guided us to safety, a small shelter away from the immediate dangers of the coast. Her silent understanding, her simple acts of human kindness, were profoundly moving after years of suspicion and harshness. She provided us with warm drinks, a bit of food, and a place to rest, simple gestures that felt like miracles after our harrowing journey. She helped us continue on our journey to Athens, providing us with what little assistance she could, guiding us towards the next steps, ensuring we avoided pitfalls. Her act of pure, unselfish help was a small light in the darkness that had enveloped my life. It was a glimpse of humanity's better side, a stark contrast to the brutality I had known. Her kindness was a balm to my raw, weary soul. I remember the warmth of the tea she offered, the gentle firmness of her hand as she pointed us in the right direction. It was a moment of grace, an unexpected gift in a world that had so often seemed devoid of it. I had been taught to view outsiders with suspicion, but her actions defied all those teachings, opening my mind to the possibility of a different kind of human connection, one built on empathy rather than fear. In Athens, I found work, regular jobs that allowed me to survive, to earn a meager living, but also to observe. The city was bustling, filled with people from all walks of life, a stark contrast to the closed, rigid society I had left behind. I spent approximately 6 years working in Athens, primarily for a solar panel company. It was honest labor, demanding physically but offering a sense of stability I had never known. The predictability of the work, the regular rhythm of earning and saving, was a comfort. After long workdays, tired and weary, I found myself drawn to certain places. It started subtly, a curiosity, a pull I could not explain. I would walk past Orthodox churches, noticing their peaceful presence, the quiet reverence emanating from within. The architecture was different, the symbols unfamiliar, yet there was a stillness, a sense of serenity that intrigued me. At first, I only lingered outside, observing the people going in and out. Then, cautiously, I ventured inside. The silence was profound, broken only by the soft murmur of prayers or the gentle flicker of candles. There was a sense of peace, a tranquility that was utterly alien to anything I had ever known. It was not the rigid, fear-based peace of Taliban enforced order, but a deep, inner calm that resonated with something aching within my own soul. The aroma of incense, the soft glow of the icons, the gentle light filtering through stained glass, all contributed to an atmosphere of profound solemnity and beauty. It was an environment that seemed to hush the clamor of the outside world, and more importantly, the clamor within my own mind. I would sit for hours, simply observing, absorbing the quiet atmosphere, feeling a strange sense of belonging, a resonance that was entirely new. The faces of the people I saw praying there were different from the hardened, fearful expressions I was used to. There was a genuine devotion, a quiet joy, that drew me in. I watched as they crossed themselves, as they venerated the icons, and though I did not understand the rituals, I understood the sincerity of their hearts. I wanted to understand this peace. I wanted to know what drew these people, what sustained this quiet reverence. My language skills, which had been slowly improving, became a tool for a new kind of exploration. I sought out books, anything that could shed light on this unfamiliar faith. I eventually located a New Testament, specifically one in modern Greek. It was a small, unassuming book, but it would change the course of my life forever. I began to read it slowly, painstakingly at first, looking up unfamiliar words, trying to grasp the meaning. The stories were simple, yet profound. The teachings of Jesus, of love, forgiveness, compassion, and sacrifice, struck me with an intensity one had never experienced. It was the complete opposite of the radical ideology I had once adhered to. There was no hatred, no call for vengeance, no rigid rules based on fear. Instead, there was an invitation to a relationship, a message of grace and redemption. As my language skills improved, the scriptures spoke deeply to me. The words resonated with a truth that transcended all the violence and misery I had witnessed. I read about Jesus, about his life, his teachings, his crucifixion, and his resurrection. The concept of a God who loved humanity so much that he would send his Son to suffer and die for them was revolutionary to my understanding. It challenged everything I had been taught about a stern, distant, and wrathful deity. I found myself drawn, irrevocably drawn, to this message of unconditional love and sacrifice. The longing for baptism began to stir within me, a deep, undeniable desire to fully embrace this new path, to shed my old identity, and to be reborn in Christ. It was a quiet, personal conviction, but it grew stronger with each passing day. I knew the dangers of such a step, the ultimate betrayal it would be considered by my former life, but the spiritual peace I felt was worth any risk. The contrast between the teachings of the Quran and the New Testament was stark, and the gospel resonated with a profound sense of inner peace that I had never found in my former faith. I had sought divine favor through rigorous adherence to laws and through acts of violence, yet here was a God who offered salvation through grace, through simple faith and love. This radical shift in understanding brought a profound sense of relief, like a heavy burden being lifted from my shoulders. The words of Jesus, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest," spoke directly to the deep exhaustion of my soul. I had spent my entire life burdened by fear, by rules, by the constant struggle for purity and righteousness in a world of endless conflict. Now I felt an invitation to true rest, to a different kind of peace. I began to seek out more information, quietly asking questions, observing the practices of the Orthodox Church more closely. I learned about the veneration of icons, the role of the saints, the significance of the liturgy. These practices, initially alien, began to make sense within the context of the love and reverence I was discovering. The ancient traditions of Orthodoxy, its deep roots and its continuity with the early Church, provided a sense of stability and timelessness that appealed to my longing for something enduring and true. I felt a growing intellectual and spiritual hunger, consuming every bit of information I could find about this new faith. I spent hours in quiet contemplation, reflecting on my past, on the path that had led me here. The anger and resentment that had simmered within me for so long, a residue of the violence and injustice I had experienced and participated in, began to dissipate, replaced by a profound sense of forgiveness and a desire for reconciliation. This was a radical change, a transformation from the very core of my being. I understood that true strength lay not in violence or power, but in love and sacrifice, as exemplified by Christ himself. This realization was both humbling and liberating. My decision to become a Christian was a personal one, made after much contemplation and inner struggle. I remember the approximate time I fully decided that I wanted to be baptized. It was shortly before Pascha, the Orthodox Easter, in 2013. The timing felt significant, coinciding with the most sacred period in the Christian calendar, a celebration of resurrection and new life. It symbolized my own spiritual resurrection, my emergence from a life of darkness into the light of Christ. I knew the decision was irreversible, that it sealed my fate in a way that my escape from Afghanistan had not. There would be no turning back. I was ready for it. The longing for baptism became an overwhelming desire, a yearning for formal initiation into the faith that had brought me such profound peace. I sought out a priest, explaining my background, my journey, and my heartfelt desire to be baptized. He listened patiently, with compassion in his eyes, and guided me through the final steps of preparation. There was a sense of profound reverence and solemnity in his approach, which further deepened my conviction. The culmination of this journey came on the evening of June 5, 2013. It was mid-Pentecost on the old calendar, a significant day in the Orthodox Christian tradition. I traveled to Mount Athos, a place revered as a bastion of Orthodox monasticism. It was a sacred place, steeped in centuries of spiritual devotion, a world apart from the turmoil I had known. The journey to Mount Athos felt like a pilgrimage, a final step towards complete transformation. The peninsula itself, with its rugged terrain and ancient monasteries, seemed to breathe history and spirituality. The air felt different, imbued with centuries of prayer and asceticism. There, overlooking the vast, tranquil Aegean Sea, I was baptized by the monks of the Athonite cell of Maruda. The atmosphere was one of profound peace and holiness. The chanting of the monks, the flickering candles, the scent of incense, all contributed to an experience that felt truly divine. The water washed over me, cool and cleansing, symbolizing a profound spiritual rebirth. As I emerged, I felt a lightness, a freedom, a peace that transcended all understanding. It was as if the weight of my past, the burden of my former identity, was literally washed away. In that moment I shed the name Ahmed, the name of my past, the name associated with a life of conflict and a rigid ideology. I took the Christian name Alexander, a new identity, a symbol of my new life in Christ. Mount Athos, with its ancient prayers and its serene beauty, provided the perfect backdrop for this momentous occasion. It was not just a change of religion, it was a complete reorientation of my soul, a spiritual homecoming. The moment of my baptism was the most significant turning point of my entire life, a complete severing from the past and a joyous embrace of a new future. My life as Alexander, an Orthodox Christian, is one of continuous spiritual growth and reflection. I continue to live in Greece, embracing the quiet monastic life as much as possible, seeking to deepen my understanding of the faith that transformed me. Mount Athos remains a spiritual anchor, a reminder of the day I found true freedom and peace. My journey underscores the incredible power of faith to radically redirect a life, even one that was once deeply immersed in violence and radical ideology. I, who once served the Taliban, who was indoctrinated in a worldview of strict enforcement and unwavering militancy, found grace and forgiveness in the teachings of Christ. It is a transformation that still amazes me. The daily routine of monastic life on Mount Athos, which I now strive to emulate and participate in, is a stark contrast to the chaos I once knew. My day often begins in the early hours, well before dawn, with the communal prayers of the Orthros service, a time of deep meditation and spiritual communion. The ancient hymns and psalms fill the stillness of the monastery, resonating with a timeless truth. Following this, I engage in various forms of physical labor, or obedience, as it is called. This could involve working in the monastery gardens, tending to olive groves, helping in the kitchen, or assisting with the maintenance of the ancient buildings. Manual labor, combined with prayer, helps to keep the body disciplined and the mind focused on God. Meals are simple and communal, often taken in silence while one of the monks reads from the Holy Scriptures or the writings of the Church Fathers. This practice ensures that even the act of eating becomes a spiritual exercise, nourishing not just the body but also the soul. After a brief period of rest or recreation, the cycle of prayer and work continues, punctuated by the various hourly services throughout the day. Vespers, the evening prayer service, brings the day to a close, leading into a period of quiet contemplation and preparation for sleep. This disciplined rhythm, repeated day after day, fosters a profound sense of inner peace and spiritual growth. The emphasis on solitude and silence, spent in my cell or in quiet corners of the monastery, allows for deep introspection and personal prayer, particularly the constant repetition of the Jesus Prayer. This continuous remembrance of Christ brings a profound sense of His presence, a comfort and strength that transcends any earthly struggle. The monastic life is a life of humility, obedience, and unwavering devotion to God, a path that has offered me a purpose and a peace I never imagined possible. The path is not without its silent burdens. I carry the memories of my past, the echoes of war, the faces of those I knew. The knowledge that apostasy is punishable by execution under Taliban rule is a constant, stark reminder of the grave dangers faced by countless other converts who remain in Afghanistan. I escaped that fate, but many others cannot. I know that if my new identity, my Christian faith, were to be discovered by my former associates, my life would be in immediate peril. This reality means I live a quiet, discreet existence, always aware of the need for caution. My story remains largely untold to the wider world, existing primarily within the circles of those who know the depths of the persecution faced by Afghan Christians. I often think of those who, like me, may be disillusioned with the violence and fanaticism of the Taliban, but who have no means of escape. I pray for their safety, for their enlightenment, for their courage to seek truth wherever it may be found. The stories of continued persecution that filter out of Afghanistan are a constant ache in my heart. Stories of secret house churches, of believers going door to door to avoid detection, of families torn apart by conversion, of the constant threat of violence, imprisonment, or even death if their faith is discovered. The Taliban's strict interpretation of Sharia law leaves no room for religious freedom, and their declaration that there are no Christians in Afghanistan is a chilling attempt to erase an entire community. Yet, despite the hidden nature of my life, there is an immense sense of purpose and gratitude. I pray for my homeland, for its suffering people, for a true and lasting peace that transcends political ideologies. I pray for those who are still trapped in the cycle of violence, for those who are searching for truth amidst the chaos. My transformation is a testament that even from the most unlikely of backgrounds, from the most radical of paths, a profound encounter with faith can occur. The human spirit, despite immense suffering and indoctrination, can yearn for something more, something profoundly different. I believe that even in the darkest corners of Afghanistan, the seeds of truth are being sown, often through subtle means, through online ministries or the quiet witness of those who have already found Christ. The hope for my people is that they too might find the peace that transformed my own life. My life now is dedicated to the pursuit of spiritual truth and a connection with the divine that I never knew was possible. The teachings of the Orthodox Church, with their emphasis on love, humility, and inner peace, are a daily guide. I have found a community of believers that accepts me, not for my past, but for who I am in Christ. The solace I find in prayer, in Scripture, and in the traditions of the Church is a stark contrast to the constant turmoil that once defined my existence. I am Alexander, a new creation, a testament to the transformative power of a God who offers redemption to all who seek it, no matter how distant their starting point. My story is one of escape, not just from a physical place, but from a spiritual bondage, a journey from darkness into a light that continues to illuminate my path every single day. I am alive, truly alive, for the first time in my life, and I owe it all to the grace I found in Christ. The silence of the monastery, the rhythmic chanting of the services, the profound sense of peace that permeates this holy mountain, all serve as a constant reminder of the incredible journey I have undertaken. I spend hours in study, delving into the ancient texts of the Church Fathers, seeking to deepen my understanding of the mysteries of faith. Each word, each theological concept, opens up new vistas of understanding, revealing a richness and depth that was entirely absent from my previous rigid worldview. I reflect often on the path that led me here, a path filled with hardship, violence, and despair. I think of the young man I once was, consumed by anger and a narrow ideology, convinced that only through force could justice be achieved. That young man, Ahmed, could never have imagined the peace and love that Alexander has found. The contrast is so profound that it often feels like a dream, yet the reality of my new life, my new faith, is undeniable. I remember the pervasive fear in Afghanistan, the constant threat of retribution for any perceived transgression, the stifling of individual thought and expression. Here, on Mount Athos, there is a different kind of freedom, a spiritual liberty that transcends any earthly confines. It is a freedom found not in lawlessness, but in voluntary submission to God's will, in obedience to the spiritual fathers, and in the pursuit of humility. This paradox, of finding freedom through submission, is one of the profound truths I have come to embrace. My heart aches for those still suffering under the brutal hand of the Taliban in my homeland. I know that many are disillusioned, just as I was, searching for answers, for hope, for a way out of the unending cycle of violence and oppression. I believe that God is working in their hearts, even in the most unlikely of places, opening their eyes to a different truth. The thought of them gives purpose to my prayers, to my quiet life of contemplation. I carry their burdens in my heart, knowing that their suffering is far greater than my own in many ways, because they lack the freedom to openly seek the truth that transformed me. I am safe here, in this haven of spiritual peace, but they are not. Their courage in maintaining their secret faith, or even in daring to question the dominant narrative, is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of divine grace. I am often reminded of the words of Christ, about loving one's enemies and forgiving those who persecute you. These were concepts that were utterly alien to my former life, where revenge and retribution were deeply ingrained principles. It is a daily struggle to live by these teachings, to truly forgive those who caused so much suffering, to pray for those who still adhere to the ideology I once embraced. But it is a struggle I willingly undertake, knowing that true peace begins within, with the transformation of the heart. The spiritual journey is not easy. It requires constant vigilance against old habits of thought, against the temptations of pride and anger. But the rewards are immeasurable. A profound sense of connection to God, an inner peace that the world cannot give, and a hope that transcends all earthly circumstances. My transformation from a Taliban member to an Orthodox monk is a testament to the boundless mercy of God, a living example that no one is beyond redemption, no heart too hardened to be touched by divine love. It is a story that, though largely hidden from the world, carries a powerful message of hope for those who feel lost, trapped, or consumed by darkness. I am a living witness to the truth that true peace is found not in power or control, but in the humble embrace of Christ's love. My life now is a quiet offering of gratitude, a silent prayer of thanksgiving for the grace that led me from the battlefields of Afghanistan to the sacred tranquility of Mount Athos, from a life of violence to a life of worship. I am Alexander, and my journey continues, guided by the unwavering light of my newfound faith. Every sunrise over the Aegean, every evening prayer in the monastery, every moment of contemplation strengthens my resolve and deepens my commitment to this blessed life. I have found my home, not in a physical place, but in the heart of God.
As Ahmed's story draws to a close in the silent sanctuaries of Mount Athos, we must remember the harsh reality faced by those who remain in Taliban-ruled lands. In Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, renouncing Islam is legally defined as apostasy and carries the harshest penalties. Under their strict interpretation of Sharia, men accused of converting to Christianity can face execution, often by hanging or beheading. Women risk lengthy prison sentences, forced marriage, and loss of inheritance rights. A high-profile case is that of Abdul Rahman in 2006, who was charged with blasphemy and spared a death sentence only after international outcry. Similarly, aid worker Saeed Musa endured months of imprisonment in 2011, highlighting the severity of these punishments. Lawyers, family members, even neighbors who defend suspected converts risk being accused of apostasy themselves, creating a ripple effect of fear. Taliban door-to-door raids by morality police search for secret gathering, pushing thousands of Afghan Christians into clandestine house churches. Reports of individuals disappearing into unmarked detention centers suggest extrajudicial killings are not uncommon. Against this backdrop, the courage it took for someone like Ahmed to embrace a new faith becomes truly extraordinary. Thank you for watching, stay safe, and join us next time for another incredible story.